been playing the wrong game lately. It's easy to go about pursuing stupid goals in an intelligent way. I don't mean the pool you're selecting, I don't mean playing poker, anything like that. What I mean is your approach to that thing. What I mean is what you're actually trying to achieve in the big picture. You end up doing nothing but rehashing the same old patterns. You're not really learning anything. You get bored at the table. The idea that you should actually choose to have fun, to prioritize play, to be creative, to express yourself at the table, to sit down and know why you started playing to begin with. If you care about safety more than you care about discovery and excitement and exploration, it's very easy to stagnate. A lot of people have a lot more fun becoming a poker pro than staying a poker pro. Once you have a system that works, once you know you can beat this game for more money than you need, and sort of know the general plays you're making, there's no longer a necessity, there's no survival pressure, there's no urgency to develop a new strategy and keep moving. You might set your sights on a higher limit, so as you're climbing the stakes, you're going to have to figure new stuff out to beat some of the regulars. But even then, it can feel like a lot of the same old, if you keep yourself in a really narrow box, if you don't open yourself up to what is actually possible at the poker table. What is the game that I am choosing to play here? What am I actually open to in my experience? What is my relationship to the game? What actually matters in the choices I make at the table and the big picture? What does my life look like away from the table? What does my review and my study and my game planning look like? Do I have a team of peers, of like-minded people I enjoy working with, so I'm actually studying and learning about the game daily? I'm actually having my worldview, my perspective, my defaults challenged? Or being encouraged to develop and lean further into a new line of inquiry to actually test out, develop, and deploy new strategies? All of that is just what has come to me off the cuff, tuning into what actually excites me about playing poker. And that's contrasted with how I get in my head if I've spent, say, some time away from the game or I'm on a downswing, and I can get triggered into a sort of fear mode, avoidance mode, depressive mode, when our playing seems difficult or forced, or like if I don't get really good results, I'm not going to enjoy it. Like the idea of sitting down and grinding, sitting down and being a human robot who does nothing but follow a set of written strategies and rules, completely miserable. That's not an experience I would wish upon my worst enemy for any extended period of time. Being able to delegate decision making to some sort of higher rational process is valuable and maybe an exciting experiment. And I think it's part of what makes a great player. But all of that logical, rational framework, written rule stuff is just a structure that is meant to enable you to freely play within the boundaries you've sort of set yourself. It's to save you the mental energy of having to think about every option at the poker table. Like a lot of the best, like when you know that you're picking one or two sizings, it's just so you can think about which of the two sizings you're going to use, big or small. Because you don't have to think about the 1,000 different bet sizes you could bet every single hand. You've got more important things to spend your resources on, to spend your limited mental capacity on in this 30-second decision. And so we have these constraints, we have these simplifications, these rules of thumb that support us and guide us. And then when we play, our job is to realize what's actually going on in front of us, make the best decision we can. Frameworks direct you to your good option. They simplify math and complicated things that you don't have time to work out in real time. And then from there, you actually get to play some frickin' poker. So if you're playing poker just to survive, just to get through the session, just to make a meager win rate, and you feel held back, either completely lost and unable to make a decision, or restricted by almost knowing too well, having too clear of an idea, too rigid a framework and a rule set that forces you to stay within those confines instead of being able to play with them and bend the rules and break them because you understand where they're coming from and as far as they're useful than where they actually break, you're going to have a bad time. It's not going to be a fulfilling professional experience. And so you're not going to want to play. You're not actually going to be curious and interested in learning from feedback. All you're doing is applying the rules, shutting down, releasing that stress elsewhere, coming back, and resetting it. If you compare that to knowing what your general strategy is, having a sense of maybe how you play on your A game when your intuition is really strong and you can make these reads and trust them, and what you do on your B game and your C game where you aren't feeling your best. Like your floor is good enough to get you that meager edge you want, but then as soon as you're able to bring yourself into that flow state again, that's where you're really locking into super high edge. You're playing creatively and freely, but the creative and free plays you make aren't actually costing you edge. They're generally generating edge. You're doing something that maybe you haven't done before or done very often, but you just know there's a good reason to do it, either because you have a read on where your opponent's at in this hand, or it's just come to you and you have such a strong framework and intuitive understanding of the game that you can kind of freestyle in these new situations. Because that freestyling and that creativity and that imbalance in your opponent in a given hand and also in their strategy on the whole, or when they're in a certain state of mind, this dynamic is always changing thing that we're trying to get a map and a picture and a pre-plan for is always going on. So let's say there's the universal laws and the principles and the theory framework, the rules. Then there's that is our best job at making sense of this chaotic system. Then there's the ever-changing fluid dynamic system experience, real-time, present moment playing some goddamn poker. And you want your understanding and your structure of the framework to help guide you, to help you pay attention to the right things. And then when you have time to review hands later, to be able to make sense of why you did what you did and evaluate if you think it makes sense or if you would change it at a different time. But weirdly enough, playing the bots on Ignition has enabled a lot of creativity for me. Because when I was playing in this fear mode, I was trying to play on Ignition and trust my old reads after a year plus away. And then they weren't working because there were a lot of bots signaling fake human reads, which then made me doubt myself and made me think, everything I know about poker, everything I've learnt, no longer applies. It goes out the window. And so I sort of panicked because I both couldn't trust myself and I couldn't not trust myself or I'm fucked. It's just paranoia. But it was paranoia about a real thing that happened in the ecosystem. There's an unknown number of bots. My reads weren't accurate enough. I could no longer assume that opponents are going to get scared on certain rivers and perceive my actions a certain way because these profiles, these seats are doing something different. But a bot that's playing a static strategy, I'm free to bluff it however I like. Even against a pseudo GTO bot, I can bluff three different, like I could overbluff or underbluff in position as much as I like against its static strategy in an anonymous game. If it's overfolding in one line against one line, it's going to keep overfolding or it's going to keep overcalling. And if it's balanced, it's going to keep being balanced. So even against a bot with a fixed strategy, I can freely play creatively at the table. And it actually eliminates a fear aspect of paranoia, which is, what if they notice what I'm doing and adapt to it and counter it in real time? There's an element, say, in a live poker session where people are very quick to over-adjust, and I'd say that happens online too. If you see a player 3-bet 3 hands in a row, very easy to think that they're super aggressive. And there's a chance they are, so worth paying attention to, but maybe they just 3-bet 3 times in a row. The bots don't care about that. So that was rambly, but even when playing the bots on Ignition, I'm not restricting myself to some sort of hyper restricted rule set. Even when playing the bots on Ignition, I use the rules to give me constraints to enable options. I'm going to try this line. I'm going to try this sizing scheme. They're not going to counter my specific imbalance unless they anticipated it already. So you would think that I should be playing more rules, like rule focused, more restricted than ever. And I feel like I've just got like a license to freestyle, because even against the bots, doing things that you understand but they're not prepared for is the way to make money in high level poker. And it's the way to make money in poker at all stakes. But at a low level, people don't understand what happens when you range bet a quarter. At high stakes, people understand what that means, and you've got to get a little bit more creative. This is cold brew, by the way. 1:59 p.m. I'm not a total degenerate. If you're not playing poker the way you want to play it, if you aren't playing, if you're just applying a prescribed strategy, if you're trying not to make mistakes, if you can't afford to experiment, you won't be growing, you won't be learning, you're forcing yourself to fit some ideal of like a statue fixed perfect strategy that doesn't exist. And while we can aspire to this balance and this higher ideal, like the universal laws of poker, and it's worth understanding and I fully respect it, it's not the end goal. It's like a North Star. It's a centering mechanism to find your way back to balance that frees you to veer off and respond to what actually presents itself to you in game. When you play that dynamically, poker at all stakes, all games, as long as you're not having a panic attack, actually feels like a game you're playing. And when you understand that, you're able to dynamically exploit and freestyle and explore different lines, either using, say, solver as a reference point to veer off from, or to pick different sizing schemes, different strategies that other people haven't fully studied. But when I say this, most players, most people listening, still haven't fully understood the basics. When two players range bet a third, why is one player getting more edge than the other one? How is one player using that to set up positive opportunities for themselves in the future and capitalize on their opponent's weakness? And how is the other player just using it because they heard that that's something that they are meant to be doing and they're just following the crowd? I play very differently against these two players, even seeing the same action. And I can look them in the eye and guess where they're at in that range between a player who's doing that with intent and a player who's doing that to avoid a mistake.